The shadow as power is one of the most misunderstood aspects of human psychology. Most people believe that darkness within them must be destroyed, purified, or denied, as if the only acceptable part of the self is the light. But the shadow is not evil by nature. It is repressed vitality, unexpressed potential, and the energy of the self that has been hidden beneath layers of fear, guilt, and conformity. Every emotion we label as negative, anger, jealousy, pride, hatred, greed, holds within it an immense charge of psychic energy. When that energy is denied, it turns against us, leaking out through anxiety, depression, and self-sabotage. But when it is confronted and understood, it becomes the very force that strengthens our boundaries, fuels our creativity, and grounds us in authenticity. The shadow is formed early in life. The moment a child realizes that not every emotion is welcome in the world. When a boy cries, he is told to be strong. When a girl expresses anger, she is told to be nice. Slowly, these natural instincts, rage, defiance, lust, ambition, are buried in the unconscious. Yet the psyche never forgets. What is repressed does not vanish. It waits in the depths, watching, storing energy, waiting for the right moment to be seen. The adult who has spent years suppressing their shadow often feels a strange exhaustion, as if life itself has lost flavor. That fatigue comes from the constant effort to keep powerful instincts locked away. To live without acknowledging one's shadow is to live only half alive. When the shadow finally erupts, it does so violently through conflict, addiction, cruelty, or emotional collapse. People are shocked by their own capacity for darkness, saying things like, "I don't know what came over me." But the truth is, it was always there. The outburst is not a loss of control. It is the psyche's desperate attempt to restore balance. The human being cannot live forever divided against itself. The more one identifies with being only good, moral, or pure, the stronger the opposite side becomes. Every exaggerated light inevitably casts an exaggerated shadow. This is why the most virtuous individuals can fall into sudden hypocrisy or secret vice. Their disowned energy demands expression. The transformation begins when we stop labeling the shadow as an enemy. To meet your shadow is to meet your buried power. The aggression you condemn may be the assertiveness you need to defend yourself. The envy you hide may be the signal of your deepest desire to grow. The arrogance you despise may be the seed of your rightful confidence. The shadow carries all the instincts necessary for survival, strength, and evolution. The task is not to destroy these instincts, but to refine them, to integrate their raw energy into conscious purpose. Only then does the individual move from reaction to creation. Confronting the shadow requires brutal honesty. It asks you to admit what you secretly enjoy hating, what you project onto others, what you accuse the world of being. The shadow reveals itself in moments of irrational emotion. When you feel triggered, when you judge harshly, when you despise someone without clear reason. What you hate most in another often mirrors the part of yourself that you have not accepted. This is why the shadow is a mirror, not a monster. Each confrontation with it is an invitation to see a deeper truth about who you are. The more consciously you approach it, the less control it has over you. You stop being possessed by moods and impulses because you recognize them as your own forgotten energy. The integration of the shadow is an act of inner alchemy. It is the process of turning the lead of unconscious emotion into the gold of conscious awareness. This transformation does not happen through intellect alone. It happens through experience, humility, and reflection. It requires feeling the heat of your anger without acting destructively, acknowledging your envy without drowning in shame, and facing your fear without surrendering to it. Slowly, the repressed energy begins to flow again, not as chaos, but as creative fire. You begin to sense that the darkness you feared was never meant to consume you. It was meant to strengthen you. To integrate the shadow is to accept that you are both light and dark, saint and sinner, creator and destroyer. You discover that moral perfection is an illusion, that balance is the true virtue. This awareness brings authenticity. You no longer need to pretend to be good because you have become real. Real strength is not found in denial, but in wholeness. The individual who embraces their shadow walks with a quiet authority, no longer threatened by the world's judgment, because they have made peace with their own. The shadow as power means reclaiming every emotion that has been shamed out of you. It means recognizing that your rage can become determination, your lust can become passion, your fear can become awareness, and your hatred can become focus. Each of these dark emotions, when integrated, serves the evolution of the self, the warrior, the artist, the healer. All are born from those who have walked through their own darkness and emerged carrying its fire. The shadow is the furnace of transformation, the place where fragments of your soul are waiting to be reunited. To deny it is to remain divided. To embrace it is to become whole, conscious, and alive. Repression creates monsters because whatever the conscious mind refuses to face does not disappear. It only hides in the depths, waiting to emerge in distorted and destructive forms. Every emotion that is denied, every desire that is shamed, every truth that is silenced gathers energy in the unconscious. The psyche does not tolerate vacuum. It preserves everything that consciousness rejects. Over time, what was once a small impulse becomes a force of its own, a living energy seeking expression. And when it finally breaks through, it does so violently, irrationally, and often in ways as that terrify the very person who repressed it. The monster is not born from evil, but from avoidance. It is the soul's rebellion against the tyranny of suppression. From childhood, society trains individuals to repress. A boy is told not to cry, not to appear weak, not to show tenderness. A girl is told to smile, to please, to hide her anger and ambition. The natural impulses that keep a human whole are divided into good and bad. And only one side is allowed to exist. This split creates an internal war. The emotions that are cast out do not die. They sink into the unconscious and begin to ferment. A person may grow up believing they are kind, humble, or spiritual, yet beneath that mask lies envy, rage, lust, or pride, forces that have been pushed into darkness. The more one tries to appear pure, the more pressure builds within, until the shadow breaks loose and expresses itself through sabotage, addiction, or cruelty. Repression is not peace. It is containment under pressure. The individual who represses does not become harmless, only unconscious. The mind spends enormous energy keeping forbidden feelings buried, creating constant fatigue and anxiety. Depression often follows because vitality itself is trapped behind walls of control. The person feels numb, disconnected, lifeless, not because they lack emotion, but because emotion has been imprisoned. The energy that could have gone into creation and growth is used instead to maintain repression. The monster grows not from darkness itself, but from the refusal to bring light into it. Repression also breeds projection. What we cannot accept within ourselves, we unconsciously assign to others. We condemn in them what we secretly fear in ourselves. The judgmental person who hates arrogance may be denying their own desire for recognition. The moral crusader who attacks others' immorality may be hiding their own forbidden impulses. Projection is how repression sustains itself. It allows us to remain blind to our inner world while pretending to be righteous. But every judgment is a reflection. The more fiercely we reject something in others, the more likely it belongs to us. In this way, repression ensures that we are haunted by our own disowned nature. In relationships, repressed emotions create chaos. The person who suppresses anger to appear kind will eventually explode over something trivial. The one who hides jealousy will undermine their partner in subtle ways. The one who denies their need for control will manipulate through guilt or silence. Because repressed emotions cannot speak directly, they speak indirectly. Through sarcasm, passive aggression, or withdrawal, the relationship becomes a battlefield of shadows where both parties fight ghosts rather than truths. The tragedy is that the monster is not the other person, it is the unacknowledged part of ourselves demanding recognition. In society, collective repression creates collective monsters. When a culture represses sexuality, it breeds perversion. When it represses aggression, it breeds violence. When it represses emotion, it breeds numbness. The atrocities of history often arise from repressed collectives that can no longer contain their shadow. What is forbidden individually becomes explosive collectively. Entire groups project their denied impulses onto others, scapegoating, dehumanizing, and destroying what mirrors their own disowned darkness. The wars we fight externally often mirror the wars we refuse to face within. The process of repression is subtle and often unconscious. It begins with shame, the moment a child learns that certain feelings make them unlovable. They adapt to survive, hiding the parts of themselves that cause disapproval. Over years, the mask becomes identity. They forget what they have hidden and believe they are only what the world approves of. Yet the body remembers. The repressed emotions live in tension, in illness, in anxiety. Dreams become filled with monsters, chases, and shadows because the unconscious tries to communicate through symbols what the conscious mind refuses to hear. The psyche will not rest until it is whole. The monster born of repression does not seek destruction, it seeks integration. It wants to be seen, heard, and understood. The problem is that by the time it surfaces, it often carries rage accumulated over years of neglect. People act out in destructive ways because they have lost the ability to consciously engage with their shadow. The outburst is not madness, it is compensation. The greater the repression, the more violent the return. This is why individuals who appear saintly on the surface can commit shocking acts. Their denied energy has turned against them. Repression is psychological inflation. The more one identifies with the light, the larger and darker the shadow becomes. Healing begins the moment one stops repressing and starts observing. Awareness is the only solvent of repression. When anger arises, naming it weakens its power. When envy appears, acknowledging it transforms it into insight. Every emotion wants recognition, not judgment. The act of seeing what has been hidden brings balance. But the path is not easy because repression has been a survival mechanism for so long. The ego fears losing control, not realizing that what it fears is precisely what could make it whole. To bring the monster into awareness is to reclaim the energy trapped within it. The same force that destroyed peace can then be used to rebuild purpose. Repression creates monsters, not because the unconscious is evil, but because it has been neglected and starved of understanding. The monster is the cry of the soul demanding unity, the symbol of everything we try to forget but cannot escape. When we bury emotion, it grows roots in darkness. When we refuse to feel, it learns to scream through our behavior. The unconscious does not forgive ignorance. It insists on being seen. And until it is, it will continue to haunt, disturb, and dismantle every illusion of control we build to keep it silent. The mirror of injustice reveals not only the cruelty of the world, but the wounds of the soul that perceives it. Every time we encounter unfairness, betrayal, or cruelty, something deep within us stirs, not only outrage at the external act, but the echo of an ancient injury we have not yet healed. Injustice is never entirely about what is happening outside. It is also about what it awakens inside. The world becomes a mirror reflecting the areas of our inner landscape still filled with unresolved pain, unacknowledged anger, and forgotten worth. The sense of injustice is, therefore, both a social and a psychological phenomenon. It exposes how we relate to power, vulnerability, and the story we tell ourselves about being wronged. The feeling of injustice begins in childhood, long before we understand laws or morality. It begins the first time we are blamed for something we did not do, ignored when we spoke truth, or punished for expressing emotion. In those moments, the psyche records a message: the world is not fair, my voice does not matter, my pain will not be seen. This becomes the seed of a lifelong wound, shaping how we interpret every future slight or betrayal. Whenever injustice appears later in life, through manipulation, rejection, or exploitation, it touches that original wound. We feel not only the pain of the present, but the cumulative pain of every time we felt unseen. The outrage is ancient, the tears are ancestral, and the story repeats because the soul seeks recognition. Injustice, therefore, serves as a mirror showing us where our boundaries have been broken and where our self-worth still depends on external validation. The person who has healed their inner wounds can face unfairness without losing themselves, but the one still entangled in old pain experiences every injustice as proof of unworthiness. The mirror does not lie. It shows exactly where we still give our power away. To see injustice only as an external event is to miss its deeper message. The world merely plays back what we believe about ourselves. The more we feel powerless, the more we encounter situations that confirm that belief. The more we deny our anger, the more we attract those who provoke it. When someone treats you unjustly, it is easy to fixate on them, to see them as the villain who holds your peace hostage. But if you look deeper, you may find that they are revealing a part of you that still feels invisible or unprotected. The injustice you experience becomes a lesson in reclaiming your authority. It challenges you to define your values, to speak truth, to set boundaries where silence once lived. The pain that arises is not punishment, it is guidance. It points toward the parts of you that need acknowledgement. The mirror of injustice reflects the gap between who you are and what you have accepted. It asks whether you are ready to stop seeing yourself as the victim of the world and start seeing yourself as a co-creator within it. Many people carry an unconscious fascination with injustice because it resonates with their hidden self-image. They find themselves repeatedly drawn to relationships, careers, or environments that confirm the story of being wrong. The repetition is not accidental. It is the psyche's attempt to resolve what remains unhealed. The mind recreates scenarios that mirror the original wound, hoping this time to respond differently. Until awareness arises, the cycle continues. New faces, same pattern. In this way, injustice becomes both the curse and the cure. It tortures until it teaches. It mirrors the internal imbalance between power and helplessness, between voice and silence. To break the cycle, one must stop reacting to the mirror and start reading its reflection. There is also a collective dimension to this mirror. Every society projects its shadow into its systems of justice and power. The corruption, inequality, and cruelty we see outside are often reflections of the moral contradictions within us as individuals. The world we condemn is shaped by the consciousness we contribute to it. When millions of individuals repress their own guilt, greed, or prejudice, those forces do not vanish, they manifest as institutional injustice. The tyrant on the throne exists because the collective psyche unconsciously invites him. To truly understand injustice, we must examine not only who caused it, but also who tolerated it. The mirror of injustice, on a collective level, reflects humanity's unresolved relationship with its own shadow. The perception of injustice also reveals our values. What we consider unfair exposes what we most cherish. A person who cannot tolerate dishonesty values truth. One who suffers under oppression values freedom. Injustice awakens moral energy. It ignites the soul's desire to restore balance. But when that energy is not channeled consciously, it becomes bitterness and vengeance. The more we stare into the mirror of injustice without awareness, the more we are consumed by it. The danger lies in becoming what we hate. Many revolutions that began as a cry for justice ended in tyranny because the shadow of revenge was not recognized. The unintegrated pain of the oppressed becomes the cruelty of the oppressor. When consciousness is absent, to look into the mirror of injustice consciously is to see both sides. The external wrong and the internal resonance. It requires the courage to ask uncomfortable questions. What part of me feels powerless? What truth have I not spoken? What boundary have I allowed to be crossed? The mirror is not meant to shame, but to awaken. It invites us to move from reaction to response, from victimhood to clarity. It shows that justice in the world begins with justice within. When you stop betraying your own truth, the world's betrayals lose their power over you. When you stop silencing yourself, the noise of others' lies no longer defines your reality. The mirror reflects what you need to remember, that your perception of injustice is the soul's reminder that you were born to restore balance within yourself before I to restore it in the world. Transmutation of energy is the ancient art of turning inner chaos into clarity, pain into power, and darkness into light. It is not a concept of external magic, but an inner alchemy, where the raw forces of emotion are refined into conscious strength. Every human being carries within them an enormous reserve of psychic energy. Most of it lies dormant, trapped in emotion, memory, and reaction. Fear, anger, shame, and desire all contain tremendous vitality, yet in their unrefined state, they dominate us rather than serve us. The purpose of inner transformation is not to destroy these emotions, but to convert them into usable energy. To transform suffering into fuel for awareness. This is the principle of alchemy, not of metals, but of the soul. Every emotion, when observed without judgment, begins to change its vibration. What we call negative emotion is not evil. It is simply energy vibrating at a lower frequency of consciousness. Anger, for instance, is pure energy distorted by resistance. When met with awareness, the heat of anger becomes the fire of determination. Fear, when faced directly, turns into alertness. Desire, when purified of attachment, becomes creativity. Even grief, when allowed to flow fully, becomes compassion. The process of transmutation begins with acceptance. Whatever emotion arises, instead of labeling it wrong, one observes it as energy, moving, shifting, seeking release. Awareness is the crucible where transformation occurs. Without awareness, emotion becomes repetition. With awareness, it becomes evolution. Most people resist this process because they are taught to suppress rather than transform. They believe that control equals mastery. That discipline means denial. But suppression only freezes energy. It hides the emotion in the unconscious, where it festers and mutates. A person who suppresses anger becomes passive-aggressive. One who suppresses desire becomes compulsive. One who suppresses fear becomes rigid. The energy does not disappear. It changes form and returns with greater intensity. Transmutation, on the other hand, asks for engagement, not avoidance. It invites you to step into the feeling fully, to sense its texture, its temperature, its movement within the body. By giving it presence, you begin to extract its wisdom. The energy that once enslaved you now becomes your teacher. In the process of transmutation, suffering becomes sacred. Pain is not random. It is concentrated energy that demands to be transformed. The deeper the pain, the greater the potential for growth. People often ask why they must suffer to awaken, but suffering is the friction that awakens consciousness. It tears open the illusions that keep us asleep. When you stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what is this trying to show me? The alchemy begins. The victim mind dissolves and the observer arises. You realize that life is not punishing you, it is refining you. The experiences that break you open are the same ones that expand your container for consciousness. The fire that burns the old identity is the same fire that forges the new energy. Transmutation also operates through the body. The body is not separate from consciousness. It is the instrument through which energy flows. Every emotion leaves an imprint in the body's memory. Tension, fatigue, contraction. When you suppress emotion, you imprison energy in muscles, organs, and breath. Transmutation begins when you allow the body to express and release. Movement, breath work, and sound are natural methods of energetic transformation. A deep sigh, a cry, a dance, or a moment of stillness can shift energy that words cannot. The body speaks the language of energy more fluently than the mind ever will. To transform energy is to listen to the body's intelligence and let it complete what was once interrupted by fear. The mind plays its own role in this alchemy. Thoughts are patterns of energy shaped by belief. The more you identify with them, the more you feed their vibration. A thought born from fear will attract experiences that mirror fear. A thought born from gratitude will amplify abundance. But transmutation does not mean forcing positive thinking. It means observing thoughts until they lose the charge of identification. When you witness a thought without attaching to it, the energy trapped in it returns to neutrality. This is why awareness is the philosopher's stone of psychology. It turns reaction into insight, compulsion into choice, and emotion into intelligence. The act of witnessing is the moment of transformation. The higher stages of transmutation involve refining instinct into intuition, and desire into devotion. The instinctual energy that drives survival, sex, hunger, ambition, can be sublimated into creativity, love, and service when consciousness enters it. The artist turns passion into art, the warrior turns rage into discipline, the seeker turns longing into prayer. None of these transformations deny the original impulse, they redirect it toward higher expression. The same energy that fuels destruction also fuels creation, depending on how it is channeled. To live consciously is to become the alchemist of your own psyche, constantly transforming dense emotions into luminous awareness. Even collective emotions can be transmuted. When many individuals carry suppressed anger, fear, or grief, the collective field becomes heavy with that vibration. This is why entire societies fall into patterns of violence or despair. But just as a single cell can affect the whole body, one conscious individual can begin to purify the collective field by transforming their own energy. When you meet hatred with understanding, you neutralize a fragment of the collective shadow. When you transmute your personal pain into wisdom, you contribute to humanity's healing. Every inner act of transformation ripples outward. Energy never disappears, it only changes form, and consciousness determines the direction of that change. The transmutation of energy is not about becoming perfect, it is about becoming whole. Every fragment of yourself, every emotion you once rejected, holds a piece of your power. The darkness you fear is the raw material of your awakening. The fire of anger becomes courage, the weight of sorrow becomes empathy, the storm of fear becomes clarity. What was once chaos becomes order through the act of conscious awareness. In this way, every experience, pleasant or painful, becomes part of the same great work of inner alchemy. The energy that once enslaved you becomes the current that carries you toward your own evolution. Integration as liberation is the process through which a fragmented being becomes whole again. It is the reunion of all the parts of the self that were separated by fear, shame, trauma, and conditioning. Every human being begins life as an undivided consciousness, but the moment we enter society, we are taught to divide ourselves. We learn that some emotions are acceptable, others forbidden, some desires are noble, others sinful, some identities are praised, others punished. To survive, we cut away the parts of ourselves that threaten rejection. What remains becomes the persona, the mask we show to the world. What is hidden becomes the shadow, the unacknowledged energy that continues to influence us from the depths. Integration begins when we tire of the war within, when the desire for authenticity outweighs the desire for approval. The process of integration requires facing what we have denied. Every suppressed emotion, every disowned trait, every forgotten dream waits in the unconscious like a child waiting to be acknowledged. These fragments do not disappear, they continue to pull at us through projection, conflict, and repetition. The people we attract, the triggers that enrage us, the failures that repeat, all are reflections of the parts we have not yet integrated. Life becomes a mirror constantly showing us what we have left behind. The external world dramatizes our internal division, and the suffering we experience is the psyche's way of demanding wholeness. Liberation begins not by seeking freedom from the world, but by reclaiming the parts of ourselves we have exiled from awareness. Integration is not a moral act, but a psychological one. It does not mean justifying harmful behavior or glorifying darkness. It means recognizing that every emotion and instinct has a function, Anger protects boundaries, fear warns of danger, desire drives creation, sorrow deepens compassion. When these forces are suppressed, they turn destructive. When they are accepted and understood, they become allies. The self that integrates is not a saint, but a balanced human being. To integrate is to say to each emotion, "You belong here, but you will not rule me." This balanced relationship with the inner world creates stability and strength. The fragmented person reacts, the integrated person responds. The difference is consciousness. The ego resists integration because it was built to maintain division. The ego's survival depends on identifying with one side of duality, good over evil, strength over weakness, success over failure. It thrives on contrast and separation. To integrate threatens the ego structure because it dissolves the illusion of superiority and control. Yet true liberation requires this dissolution. Integration dismantles the false walls between opposites. It reveals that love and hate, courage and fear, creation and destruction are not enemies, but polarities of the same energy. To live integrated is to stand in the center of these polarities and move fluidly between them, guided by awareness rather than attachment. It is to embody both light and shadow without becoming enslaved by either. The path toward integration passes through the valley of discomfort. It demands that we feel what we have spent a lifetime avoiding. When grief rises, it must be felt fully. When rage surfaces, it must be witnessed without judgment. When shame appears, it must be met with compassion. Each emotion carries a key to the part of the self it guards. Avoidance keeps the prison locked. Awareness opens it. The work of integration is not glamorous. It happens in silence, in the still moments when we choose to feel rather than flee. It requires patience because the psyche releases its secrets slowly, only when it senses safety. Every time we hold space for our pain without condemning it, a piece of the fragmented self returns home. Integration also involves reconciling the opposites within our personal narratives. The mind loves to divide experience into heroes and villains, success and failure, right and wrong. But the soul does not operate through such binaries. It understands that both sides serve evolution. The betrayal that broke your trust also awakened your discernment. The fear that paralyzed you also protected you from reckless choices. The anger that consumed you also preserved your dignity. When we integrate, we stop labeling experiences as mistakes and start recognizing them as movements of the same intelligence guiding growth. Every shadow reveals the direction of the light it once obscured. The deeper we integrate, the more we perceive unity beneath contradiction. Liberation arises naturally from this unity. Freedom is not the absence of limitation, but the absence of inner conflict. When you no longer reject parts of yourself, life stops feeling like a battle. You no longer seek constant validation because you are no longer at war with your reflection. The opinions of others lose their power because they no longer touch a wound inside you. Integration gives birth to a quiet confidence, not arrogance, but peace. The integrated person does not need to prove goodness or strength. They embody it effortlessly. They have become whole, and wholeness is strength beyond all performance at its core. Integration is the restoration of inner relationship. It is the realization that every fragment of the psyche, no matter how dark, seeks belonging. When anger feels heard, it becomes assertiveness. When fear feels seen, it becomes intuition. When shame feels understood, it transforms into humility. The process resembles a family reunion of the soul, where all exiled children are welcomed back into the heart. The mind, which once divided, begins to cooperate with the heart, which unites. This harmony allows the individual to act from a place of authenticity rather than reaction. Actions born from wholeness carry a different vibration. They heal rather than harm, create rather than destroy. Integration as liberation also extends to the collective dimension of human consciousness. A fragmented society mirrors the fragmented individual. Nations project their disowned qualities onto others, just as individuals project their shadows onto those around them. War, prejudice, and division are large-scale expressions of the same inner disconnection. The healing of the world begins in the integration of the individual psyche. Each person who integrates contributes to the evolution of the collective field, dissolving the unconscious patterns that perpetuate suffering. Liberation, therefore, is not only personal but universal. It is the moment when humanity begins to remember that the divisions between self and other, between light and dark, were illusions born from fear of its own depth